Hello, welcome back. Thanks for listening in. This is let me think. Oh, that's right, episode number 8 of Dawson's Fine Art Auctioneers podcast. And I thought today I would talk to you about trends in the art and antiques world and how things change. When I look back at when I first started in the early 80s in this business, it was quite comical because at the time, people were buying Victorian chests of drawers and Victorian dressers, pine ones, of course, and they were taking them and stripping them of their paint and waxing them. And that's when I first became aware of this wax, wax, which was all the rage at the time, which was easy to apply. And it's funny because it turns full circle, and lots of good Georgian painted furniture with simulated inlay was sadly stripped. And I'd heard horror stories about good chimoiserie lacquered long case clock cases that had been stripped and all the rest of it. But I'm not sure. But now it's quite, well, probably not now. It's probably on the wane slightly. But over the last 5 years, we've seen an increase in people buying back, comically, buying back pieces of pine furniture which are stripped and were formerly painted, and now they're being painted again. So nothing is new under the sun, really. So I'm not making any sweeping statements there. But all sorts of trends are fueled by different circumstances. I can remember in the late 80s, there was a phase for chintz, Roll Winton chintz pottery, and I remember selling a sandwich set, six plates and a rectangular plate, a rectangular sandwich plate for £375. I'd be looking now to get £40 for it. So it's the ebb and flow of the market. The Chinese market has been a bull market. It's been a very strong market, and that's sort of tempered slightly. To start off, there was a sort of a scattergun approach, and anything that was Chinese. This isn't meant to be disrespectful. Anything that was Chinese was being snapped up for monumental prices. Now it's been tempered by um, that people are being slightly more selective in their purchases now. To start with, I think it was a bit like a gold rush. It was gold dust to start with, I think, and you saw huge prices realised for things which were fairly modest in honesty. Um, there are other trends that have sort of come and gone. The mahogany trend, and the sort of dark oak furniture, and sort of, I'm going to say it, I hate the term, but the brown furniture market is starting to get back on its feet a little bit, but it's nowhere near the lofty heights that it was at when it was in the 1980s, where you heard stories about people buying furniture for their retirement, put it aside. I think they'd be quite disappointed actually if they did that now. The jewellery market now is quite strong. Of course, precious metals will be high at the moment because of, as we record this, there's all the nastiness in Ukraine and all the rest of it. So any time of turbulence, there's usually an increase in the value of precious metals, because of course it's transmutable. I once had a client, a lady she was quite elderly, and she had lived through the horrors of the Second World War in Germany and had fled the persecution from the Nazis. And I dealt with her on several occasions. And I was seeing her the one day, and she said to me, "Can you sell gold coins?" And I said, "Of course we can." And she said to me, I said, "Let's have a look then." And I was expecting her to produce one gold coin. No, she produced a bag of gold coins. And I said to her, "Do you collect gold coins?" And she said, "No." She said, "But this will always be worth what it weighs." So it's instantly transmutable. And I think if you think about it, if you've experienced that kind of flight from persecution and and genocide, you're going to. It's important that your wealth is transmutable, so you can carry it with you, and it will always be worth that. So that's the reason I think that silver and gold in times of unrest take a sort of an upward hike. Um, what other trends? Yes, there are all sorts, and a lot of it now is led by interior designers. For instance, I can remember when I first started, unless it was taxidermy was a complete no-no because no one really wanted it unless it was by some of the more famous artists. And I use the word correctly, artists, because when you see their work, they're incredible. The works of Roland Ward, Peter Spicer, Van Ingen, people like that kind of ilk. You couldn't sell it. Now, there's a sort of a new wave, or there was a new wave of sort of eclecticism, which was sort of promoted by the interior design market and various television programs, and that saw a hike in use that word again in prices for hitherto unsaleable taxidermy. We do quite well here at Dawsons with taxidermy. I mean, taxidermy really is very much an art form. When you see, in fact, I think I belong to a Facebook group called, well, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. It's rubbish taxidermy, and when you see some of the offerings that are detailed on Facebook, on this particular site, you can see how it's done how it is when it's badly done. But if you see some of the finer pieces, they are incredible. They used to take it to such degrees that, for instance, Roland Ward would hand sculpt the tongues, and he used to produce tongue molds to cast in plaster for the big cats that he used to stuff and mount. It sounds a bit wrong, but there you go. And he used to go to the level of actually simulating the sort of small hair follicles on the leopards, lions, and tigers' tongues. I know it's probably a little bit politically incorrect to say that these animals they were shot and then they were stuffed and all the rest of it, but in honesty, no one wants an animal to die. But when you see these works, they are a tribute to the animal that has given its life, I guess. Still doesn't justify it, of course. But taxidermy has become very, very popular, especially the named pieces, because they're becoming rarer and rarer. And also, taxidermy, it doesn't suffer damp conditions very well. So lots of pieces have been lost. They fell from favour. They were relegated, as we touched upon in a previous podcast. They got relegated to a shed, and nature took its course, and they got or another thing is actually they can get devoured by insects, by woodworm. Woodworm will eat fur and feather, and lots of the carpet beetles will also attack them. So the very best pieces still make considerable amounts, but they're few and far between. So that's one trend. What else would I have said? There was quite a trend in the early 90s for pieces of named furniture, and the hot ticket at the time was Gillows of Lancaster, which has subsided slightly. I had a piece not too long back, and we offered it once, and it didn't sell. And I knew that I'd seen this particular piece in an old catalogue. I've got lots and lots and lots of catalogues for reference. The key is remembering where the catalogues are. That's the problem. And I found it for the second time of asking, and it actually made more than we offered it for in the first place. So it just goes to show that research and provenance does go quite a way, more like research actually than provenance. So that was quite a good turn up, really. But that market has waned. A particular piece I sold many years ago, I sadly saw sold again in New York. I sold it for, well, over £100,000, and sadly I saw it changing hands probably 2 years ago in New York. It had been stripped of any of its provenance, which was all important. It was it was the flesh on the bones. Really, it had been stripped of any of the provenance, and it sold for £20,000. Well, the equivalent to £20,000, which was sad, really, seeing as it came from a very, very fine source. But there you go. Such is life. Thank you very much.